Hi there everyone, and welcome to the Novel Strip Show, the channel where I give my opinions about books and comics that I've read. What I'd like to do today is go back to March 2017 and discuss the books that I read as part of the 50 book challenge a year that I set myself back then, and just reflect upon it, see if our opinions have changed since I last read them and rated them on Goodreads. What I'd like to do for this video is try a slightly new format. So I'll start with the name and author of the book, give a short summary with as few spoilers as possible because I like to know relatively little when going into a book. So there won't be any spoilers, but no major plot points either. And then I'd also like to give a novel fact. Just kind of living up to the name of the channel a bit more, the Novel Strip Show, give some novel facts about the novels, and then obviously followed by my opinion. So let's just crack straight on, and as usual, I'll be going in order of the one that I liked least to the one that I enjoyed most. So first up, and this was quite a surprise to me to find it in last place, but it was Stardust by Neil Gaiman. So for the brief summary, it follows the protagonist called Tristan, who has to find and bring back a star for the woman that he thinks he's in love with. So it's about his journey to retrieve the star. For the novel fact, there is a beech tree in the novel who is able to talk, and he speaks to Tristan and offers advice. And this character was actually, and the advice given was actually based on Neil Gaiman's friend, the famous singer Tori Amos. In terms of my opinion then, I actually rated it 3 stars originally, and I would perhaps even revise that and put it down to 2.5. So the reason that I say this surprises me is because I haven't rated anything else by Neil Gaiman alone anyway, just by Neil Gaiman, less than 4 stars. He's one of my favourite authors, one of the authors I would say I consistently like his work the most, and I definitely recommend him to people who like fantasy or just like reading in general. But yeah, this really surprised me as I really didn't enjoy it. Part of the reason is I think it's written in a very traditional style, and I wouldn't say any of the other works that I've read by Neil Gaiman are. It's very much a kind of traditional fairy tale. This happened, then that happened, A, B, C, D happened, and then there's the end. So I didn't really feel that I could connect with any of the characters, and it wasn't really fleshed out for me to be able to envisage the world that they were in. I just didn't really have that connection there. It was very much just felt like I was quite detached and being told a story, which may have been the intention, but yeah, it just didn't really do it for me. It didn't make it interesting for me. It is an incredibly short book, so I think that's, part of the issue there. And I definitely, wouldn't recommend it as a place to start with Neil Gaiman. Or even if you like Neil Gaiman and haven't read it, I wouldn't necessarily recommend reading it either. There is a famous film with Robert De Niro and Michelle Pfeiffer, which I definitely would recommend, however. So I know it's kind of sacrilegious to say the film's better than the book, but in this case it really is. And part of the reason is, Robert De Niro's character, for example, doesn't even appear in the book at all. And yeah, everything else is just a lot more fleshed out. There's more backstory to the characters that are there, and there's a lot more characters that aren't in the book that are in the film as well. So the whole thing is just much better, much more enjoyable for me. I'd recommend the film, but not really the book, which is a shame. Moving on then, we have next up The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood. For a brief summary, we follow an elderly lady, Iris, as she talks about her family history and the death of her sister, Laura. Laura committed suicide, and she wrote a book which was published posthumously. And so it's quite interesting because in terms of the narrative, we have Iris's first-person narrative. We then have excerpts from the book that Laura wrote, which itself talks about a book which is called The Blind Assassin, and that brings a kind of sci-fi fantasy element into the novel. But we also get newspaper cuttings surrounding Laura's death. So there's a wide variation in the narratives that we're getting. We have Iris's first-person narrative. We then have the book that Laura wrote. Within that book that Laura wrote, we have the story that the main character of that book is writing, which is this kind of sci-fi fantasy called The Blind Assassin. And then we have the sort of newspaper cuttings as well. For the novel fact about this, I actually, when I was researching it, watched a very interesting video, which I'll link in the description. And during that interview, the interviewer asks Margaret Atwood about why do people write. He says this is a question that the novel, with its many different writing styles, it's a question that it raises. And Margaret Atwood's response was really interesting. She says that if you're writing with an intent, if you have a why, if you have a reason as to why you're writing, that's quite dangerous because your work could then become propaganda. However, if you don't think about why you're writing, and if you don't write with some sort of an intent, then why would people read it? And also, what consequences could that have if you're not thinking about how your work may affect people? That could also have negative issues and problems. She talks about Iris's answer and what Iris says, but she also mentions that she gave lectures about this in Cambridge, and there was a novelisation of the responses and the lectures that she gave around that topic. So I would be fascinated to read those, because I think hearing her talk, she's clearly an incredibly intelligent woman, and it's really interesting to listen to her speak. So I'd be very interested to read those kind of non-fiction things that she's written, the essays, where she gives her thoughts on things, because I don't really enjoy the book, so I'd be interested, but I very much enjoyed hearing her speak, so I'd be interested to read something by her, which isn't prose, because as I said, didn't really enjoy the book, and to be honest, I don't really enjoy her prose writing style in general. Sticking to the Blind Assassin, it definitely wasn't awful. As I said, the varied narratives, they're incredibly interesting. It's an incredibly unique concept. I like the way she, played with everything, and there's sort of twists that are revealed in different ways, and that's good. So it definitely wasn't awful, but it is a very, very long book, and it did feel like a hard slog a lot of the time. So it's not really something that I would recommend. I did give it 3 stars on Goodreads, but again, I think I would probably drop that down to 2.5. And it's a very similar reason. The reason I didn't enjoy it is very similar to Stardust. I just didn't feel as though I could connect to the characters, and I've only read Handmaid's Tale by Atwood as well. I do plan to read more by her, but I felt the same with that as well. It's just her writing style makes the characters very two-dimensional to me. It's very much, I'm detached, I'm hearing a story about these people, but I don't go to the next level. I don't get into their headspace. I don't hear their voice in my head. I don't feel what they feel. I don't feel as though I am the character or part of the character or they're part of me. It's just very much I'm being told a story and I remain detached. And for a novel to really draw me in and for me to rate it highly, I need to get into the headspace of that character and visualize everything, not just feel like I'm reading a story or being told a story. That's very much how I felt with this book. So I wouldn't really recommend it. 2.5 because it's still, by no means awful. Just wasn't really for me. Nevertheless, concepts very, very interesting, and definitely recommend watching the video in the description, and other things by Margaret Atwood, because she's definitely very intelligent and is incredibly interesting, to me at least, to listen to her speak. Next up then, we have The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas by John Boyne. So for the summary, it follows the 9-year-old Bruno, who's the son of a Nazi officer, and what happens is he and his family move to a concentration camp for his father's job. Bruno then befriends a young Jewish boy who's kept in the concentration camp, and he's completely oblivious to what's going on. They just become good friends. For the novel fact, the Irish author John Boyne says he wrote the entire first draft of The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas in just 2.5 days, and he barely slept until he got it done. Such was his urge to get it down on paper. In terms of my opinion then, I definitely enjoyed this. I think it's really important to know that the language is incredibly simplistic, and it's definitely aimed at a younger reader. That being said, I think the language is too simplistic. Bruno's meant to be a 9-year-old child, He talks as if he was 6 or younger, to be honest, and a lot of the time I found that incredibly frustrating. I didn't find it all that believable that he was meant to be a 9-year-old, because as much as I can, I remember being 9, and I wasn't as oblivious as he is. He seems completely stupid, for want of a better word. Obviously things have changed, and we have awareness now of what happened during the war that Bruno doesn't have. However, I still think at the age of 9 he really should have been able to figure it out. And yeah, I just don't think it's particularly believable. I found him incredibly frustrating, and he just annoyed me throughout. That being said, though, he is a young boy, obviously, and it is an incredibly moving tale on the whole. So despite how annoying I found him, and hearing things through his voice, I found I could get into his headspace a bit more. And I knew from the off that it was aimed at a younger reader, so I kind of forgave it a bit. And the story did move me. So I originally gave it 4 stars. I think I would probably drop that down to 3.5, because as much as I enjoyed it, just thinking back on how much Bruno annoyed me, and also learning as I was reading about it that he was meant to be 9 years old, when I was thinking back to it, he was much younger. He was at the oldest 6. I do think it didn't live up to the character of a 9-year-old. So yeah, I'd probably drop that down to 3.5, which I feel very harsh doing, because I seem to have dropped all these books down. But I think maybe, just because I've read more and becoming a bit more discerning. But yeah, I would still recommend it if you know going in that it is aimed at a younger audience. I haven't watched the film yet, but I hear that's quite moving as well. And yeah, I think overall it's pretty good. Next up then, we have The Monogram Murders by Sophie Hannah. So this is basically a murder mystery, and it features the Agatha Christie's character Hercule Poirot. So I'm not going to really go too much more into a summary than that, because obviously that would give things away. So for the novel fact then, it's the first original novel including Hercule Poirot to be commissioned by the Christie estate, and that was done more than 38 years after Christie's death in 1976. So this is the 34th novel to feature the character of Hercule Poirot. So in terms of my opinion, I originally gave it 4 stars, and I think this was one that I would actually keep the same. I remember reading it really, really quickly. It took me, I think I read a little bit of it, and then the next day I picked it up in the morning, and I didn't go, I just spent the whole day reading it, because I couldn't put it down. So I think part of the reason why I could do that was because it was written by a modern author, so it used very modern language, but still keeping with the setting of the 30s. It was just a much more modern writing style. So yeah, really, really enjoyed that, and I think it's important. Again, I knew from the off that it wasn't by Agatha Christie, so I wasn't expecting an Agatha Christie novel. I was expecting a novel that featured the character of Hercule Poirot and some of Christie's other characters, and I was expecting the sort of mystery element to be like Agatha Christie, but I knew it wasn't going to be written by her, so I wasn't expecting something that I could read and say, this is definitely by Agatha Christie. And it gave me that. I just found it really enjoyable. And yeah, on the whole, I would definitely recommend it. There was one bit, however, I think it might have rated higher, but without obviously giving it away and spoiling it, there was one bit that I think was meant to be a red herring, but it just, ended up being a complete plot hole, and was never really resolved. So that just, kind of ruined it for me. And frustrated me a bit. If it hadn't been for that, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But on the whole, I definitely enjoyed it. I believe Sophie Hannah has now written another Poirot novel, so I'd definitely be interested to read that too. And I would recommend Monogram Murders as well to fans of Agatha Christie or Arthur Conan Doyle, or people who just enjoy mystery in general. Lastly then, we have Life of Pi by Jan Martel. So for the summary, the novel's basically split into 2 parts. The first part very much focuses on the young boy Pi, who explores the different religions of Hinduism, Christianity and Islam, which coexist in his part of India. And then in the second half of the novel, what happens is his family are on a boat, along with loads of different animals because his father owns a zoo, and there's a shipwreck, so it means he has to survive alone on a small lifeboat with the Bengal tiger from the zoo, who's named Richard Parker. For the novel Fact, in 2010, President Barack Obama wrote a letter directly to Martel describing Life of Pi as an elegant proof of God and the power of storytelling. So for my opinion there, I very much agree with Barack Obama. I really loved this book. I loved the balance initially between religion and exploring different religions, the different thoughts he has about them. And there's a very poignant scene where I believe he's actually in the zoo, and the priest from the Christian church is there, along with the leaders of the Muslim and the Hindu church, and they're kind of scandalized that they all know him because he goes to all of their places of worship, and they're shocked that he thinks he doesn't see a problem with this, that he can take the bits that he likes from each religion, and he believes he can be a follower of all three religions. They seem to very much think that that's a conflict of interest, that he can only have one religion. So that kind of, that exploration really appealed to me, and I found very, very interesting. When he's then on the lifeboat, I found it interesting as well because, you have Richard Parker there, this kind of force who he fears him, but he also respects him. He's kind of constantly looming there underneath him as this kind of thing to constantly be scared of, but also he has the very real worry that he's going to die. So, the tiger's almost like a physical embodiment of death, that kind of constant threat there. And how he deals with that, but also it's very real that they might both die as well because they don't have food to survive, etc., or fresh water, things like that. So it's very, very interesting. I do think the bit when he's on the sea drags a tiny bit. It does kind of go on a bit, but the visuals are incredible. The kind of I have a great memory of like lots of colours being mentioned when someone mentions the title of the book. Instantly colourful is the first adjective that comes to my mind, and I really liked the ending as well. It definitely made me go away and think. So I gave it 5 stars. I think I would keep that maybe 4.75, just because, reflecting back, the bit in the middle did drag a bit. But I would definitely highly recommend this book if you like things that discuss spirituality and kind of the nature of storytelling, things like that as well. Very, very interesting, and really enjoyed it. I would very much like to watch the film as well. Again, it's another one that I haven't seen. I don't watch too many films. However, I do hear that the spiritual element, the religious exploration at the beginning, is very, very much minimised in the film. I can't comment myself, but that might be something to bear in mind if you've seen the film, for example, and want to read the book. From what I hear, there's a lot more discussion about spirituality and religion. So that's everything for me this week. If you did enjoy the video, or if you've read any of the books and have differing or similar opinions, I'd love to hear. Please let me know, and thanks very much for watching.